How could you tell if your mind has been brainwashed, or your mind has been hacked, or you've been subjected to mind control, or hypnosis, or undue influence? The people who want to persuade want you to stay ignorant. Into a friend group of this turned out to be a cult, and within 2 weeks, I was believing that World War III was about to happen, that Armageddon was coming, but who believed in him as the Messiah. He talked about taking over America and amending the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who don't do what he says regarding the marriages.
Hi, this is Robert Wilkins, aka Basketball Tall, your BT dispatcher, bringing you news and commentary with a different flavor. And today's flavor is being brainwashed. How would you know if those that you love, maybe including yourself, that you're under the influence? Stay tuned, baby, because you're going to learn something today that you never knew before. Your eyes are going to be wide open. And today's topics will be about looking at how to recognize and avoid brainwashing, recognizing brainwash tactics, identifying the brainwashed. And I'll also be sharing TED Talk clips from Steve Hassan, who was once under the influence and he didn't recognize or knew that he was, but he was willing to kill for it. And he'll be talking about how can you tell if your mind has been brainwashed. Don't go anywhere, baby, because today's program is powerful. It's so powerful that it needs to be shared with everyone you know. And you need to watch it not just from the beginning, but to its end. Because why start watching something if you don't watch it to the end? Especially when in today's time, the world is on fire. And maybe you yourself may be under the influence and not even know it. But if you watch today's program, I think it'll be an eye-opener. Not just for you, but for any and everybody who watches this to the end. Stay tuned. This article is co-authored by Natalie Finblatt, Doctorate of Psychology, on how to recognize and avoid brainwashing. The term brainwashing was first used in the 1950s by American journalist Edward Hunter, reporting on the treatment of American soldiers in Chinese prison camps during the Korean War. Brainwashing techniques have been documented as far back as the Egyptian Book of the Dead and used by abusive spouses and parents, self-proclaimed psychics, cult leaders, secret societies, revolutionaries, and dictators to bring others under their thumb and manipulate them, seemingly willingly. These techniques don't involve fantastic weapons or exotic powers, but they do involve an understanding of the human psyche and a desire to exploit it. By understanding these techniques better, you can learn how to protect yourself and others from them. Don't go away. Please don't go away, because I'm just getting started. We're going to get into this, and I'm going to give you some knowledge, and then we're going to get into Steve's TED Talk that's just going to blow you away. You won't believe it. So don't go anywhere, baby. Recognizing brainwash tactics. Understand that those who attempt to brainwash others tend to prey upon the weak and vulnerable. Not everyone is a target for mind control, but certain people are more susceptible to forms of it at different times. A skillful manipulator knows what to look for and target people who are going through a difficult period in their life or a change that may or may not be of their own making. Possible candidates include people who have lost their jobs and fear for their future, recently divorced people, particularly when the divorce was a bitter one, those suffering from lingering illness, especially one they don't understand, people who had lost a loved one, particularly if they were very close to that person and had few other friends, young people away from home for the first time. These are particularly favorites of religious cult leaders. People who are regarded as socially awkward by their mainstream peers. They frequently tend to be loners, but seek like-minded people who might be few and far between. One particular predator tactic is to find out enough information about the person and his or her belief system to explain the tragedy the person has experienced in a manner consistent with that belief system. This can later be expanded to explain history in general through that belief system, while subtly modifying it to the brainwasher's interpretation. Be aware of people who try to isolate you or someone you know from outside influences. Now, I'm just getting started, so don't go anywhere. Is your mind starting to twist and think a little bit right now? Let's keep going because it's going to get deep. Don't go anywhere. As people who are experiencing a personal tragedy or other major life change are inclined to feel lonely, a skillful brainwasher works to amplify those feelings of loneliness. This isolation can take several forms. For young people in a cult, it may be preventing them from contacting their friends and family members. For a significant other in an abusive relationship, it may mean never letting the victim out of the abuser's sight or permitting contact with family and friends. For prisoners in an enemy prison camp, it may involve isolating prisoners from one another while subjecting them to subtle or overt forms of torture. 3. Watch for attacks on the victim's self-esteem. Brainwashing only works when the brainwasher is in a superior position to the victim. This means that the victim has to be broken down so the brainwasher can rebuild the victim in his or her image. This can be done through mental, emotional, or ultimately physical means for long enough to physical and emotionally wear down the target. Mental tortures may begin with lying to the victim and then progress to embarrassing or intimidating the victim. This form of torture can be done with words or gestures, ranging from an expression of disapproval to invading the victim's personal space. Emotional tortures are not kind, of course, but may begin with verbal insults, then progress to badgering, spitting, or more dehumanizing things such as stripping the victim to be photographed or just looked at. The goal of these activities is to break down your natural instinct to fight back so that you become placid. Physical tortures may include starvation, freezing, sleep deprivation, beatings, mutilations, and others. None are acceptable in society. Physical torture is commonly used by abusive parents and spouses, as well as in prison and re-education camps. I can already hear some of you saying right now, no, that doesn't apply to me. No, I don't know anybody like that. But hey, I hadn't gotten to you yet. So don't go anywhere because I'm still on the tip of the iceberg here. And you got to hear this. You can take just a little bit of your time, of your entire life, to learn something, especially in this time. Because right now, who knows? We may find ourselves in a very dangerous situation soon. So, will you be equipped? Will you know what to do? Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Number 4, look out for those who try to make being part of the group more attractive than the outside world. Along with wearing down the victim's resistance, it's important to provide a seemingly more attractive alternative to what the victim has known before contact with the brainwasher. This can be done through a variety of methods, allowing contact only with others who have already been brainwashed. This creates a form of peer pressure that encourages the new victim to want to be like and be accepted by the new group. This may be reinforced through touch, rap sessions, or group sex, or by stricter means such as a uniform dress code, controlled diet, or other rigid rules. Repetition of the message through means ranging from singing or chanting the same phrases over and over, often emphasizing certain key words or phrases. Mimicking the rhythm of the human heartbeat through the thought leader's speech cadence or musical accompaniment. This can be enhanced with lighting that's not too dim or too harsh and a room temperature to encourage relaxation. Never letting the victim have time to think. This can mean simply never letting the victim have time alone, or it can mean bombarding the victim with repeated lectures on topics beyond comprehension while discouraging questions. representing an us versus them mentality where the thought leader is right and the outside world is wrong. The goal is to achieve blind obedience, to where the victim will commit his or her money and life to the brainwasher and his or her stated goals. Now, in this political climate, we're hearing a lot of the same old repetitious stories over and over and over, the same old sayings. And basically, it's all out of fear. What they're going to do to us, what they're doing, what they're planning to do to us. They're eating your cats, your dogs. They're coming for your children. It's just over and over. Think about what I just read there. When we hear these things over, it's them against us. It's them against us. It's them against us. Repetitions, repeating these things over and over and over. And when we tune into our favorite programs and we hear this over and over every day for years, for months, think about that. Are we getting programmed unconsciously and not even realize we are? Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned because there's more. You got to hear all of this. And especially Mr. Steve when he give his TED Talk about his experience.
Trying to share my experience with the planet because everyone needs to understand this is not a mystical thing. You've heard of MK Ultra, the CIA research into mind control. The Russians were doing it. There was a Cold War run-up. I was MK Ultra 3.0. I would have died on command, killed on command.
Number 5, recognize that brainwashers often offer rewards when the victim has turned. Once the victim is completely broken and complacent, he or she can then be retrained. This can take anywhere from a few weeks to several years, depending on the circumstances of the brainwashing. An extreme form of this complacency is known as the Stockholm Syndrome, where 2 bank robbers in Sweden in 1973 held 4 hostages for a period of 131 hours. After the hostages were rescued, they found themselves identifying with their captors, to the point that one of the women became engaged to her captor and another set up a legal defense fund for the criminals. Patty Hearst, kidnapped by the Sudanese Liberation Army in 1974, is also considered a victim of Stockholm Syndrome. Now, 1974, I was in the 10th grade, and I remember that because it was all on the national news. Well, she was kidnapped, then next thing you know, they're showing her in a bank of some sort with an armed weapon, with the kidnappers, going through that process. Can you imagine that? Being kidnapped, and next thing you know, you're turned around, you're participating in their crimes? Let's read on. Number 6, recognize new ways of thinking in the victim's brain. Much of the retraining is done through some of the same operant conditioning techniques of reward and punishment that were used to break the victim down in the first place. Positive experiences are now used to reward the victim for thinking as the brainwasher's desires, while negative experiences are used to punish the last vestiges of disobedience. One form of reward is giving the victim a new name. This is commonly associated with cults, but the SLA also did this with Patty Hearst when they gave her the name Tanya. Number 7, rinse and repeat. Although brainwashing can be effective and thorough, most brainwashers find it necessary to test the depths of their control over the subjects. Control can be tested in several ways, depending on the brainwasher's goals, with the results determining how much reinforcement the victim needs to remain brainwashed. Extorting money is one way to test control, as well as enrich the brainwasher's pockets. Psychic medium Rose Marks used his control over Arthur Judge Devereaux to bilk Devereaux out of $17 million in cash and property while ruining the writer's career. Committing criminal acts, even with or for the brainwasher, is another. Patty Hearst accompanying the SLA on one of their robberies is an example of this. Now, I know I've given you quite a bit as from the text of it all, but don't go anywhere. I'm not done yet because this is so vital. It's basically urgent that we all know this. Because what if the whole nation is under a spell, a delusion, being brainwashed and not even know it? Because we have, the United States, this is the place of Hollywood. This is the media capital of the world. What better way to use mind control than through all these media outlets? Think about that for a minute. But you got to hear the rest of this. Don't go anywhere, please. It's just that important because you got to hear the TED Talk. You got to hear his story. It's just that important. Stay tuned. Now let's look at identifying the brainwashed. Look for a mixture of fanaticism and dependency. Brainwashing victims can appear focused on the group and or its leader to the point of obsession. At the same time, they seem to be unable to solve problems without the help of the group or its leader. And number 2, look for a yes person. Brainwashing victims will agree unquestionably with whatever their group or leader dictates, without any regard to the difficulty of following in lockstep or the consequences of doing so. They may also withdraw from people who don't share their interests in the brainwasher. Are you catching on yet? I probably don't make any sense to you yet, but don't go anywhere. Because when you hear this TED Talk, it's all going to come together. For right now, I'm giving you some text. But when you watch the TED Talk, it'll all come together. Don't go anywhere. Number 3, look for signs of withdrawal from life. Brainwashing victims tend to be listless, withdrawn, and devoid of whatever personality marked them before they were brainwashed. This is particularly noticeable in both cult victims and spouses in an abusive relationship. Some victims may internalize their anger, leading to depression and a host of physical disorders, possibly even to suicide. Others may vent their anger on anyone they see as the cause of their problems, often through verbal or physical confrontation. Now let's look at rinsing out the brainwashing. Make the subject aware that he or she has been brainwashed. This realization is often accompanied by denial and anguish, as the subject begins to question things without having had practice in questioning things. Gradually, the subject should become aware of how he or she was manipulated. Expose the subject to ideals that contradict the brainwashing. Exposure to multiple options without overwhelming the subject with too many options at once will provide the subject with a new, broader perspective from which to challenge the beliefs implanted by the brainwasher. Ask small questions in a non-judgmental way to restart their critical thinking processes. For instance, if the person belonged to a cult with a vow of poverty, say, "But I heard the leader lives in a Beverly Hills mansion. What do you think about that?" Some of these contrasting ideals may, in themselves, come with their own form of manipulation. In such cases, it's helpful to also seek out as unbiased forms of those ideals as possible. A stronger form of this exposure is to force the subject to relive the brainwashing experience by having him or her act it out, but providing the subject with options to counteract the brainwashing. This type of therapy requires a therapist skilled in psychodrama techniques. Encourage the subject to make his or her own decisions based upon the new information. Let them come to their own conclusions as you ask questions. At first, the subject may become anxious about making decisions for himself or herself, or feel ashamed about making the wrong decision now or in the past. With practice, however, this anxiety will fade. Now that I've given you some psychology textbook information, now is the time to hear Steve Hassan, to hear his story, how he got involved, and how he came to the realization that he was actually brainwashed. You won't believe it, but you got to hear it because it's so important.
How could you tell if your mind has been brainwashed, or your mind has been hacked, or you've been subjected to mind control, or hypnosis, or undue influence? The people who want to persuade want you to stay ignorant. The authoritarian cults, that, including Putin, who grew up in the Soviet Union, which was a political cult, and I'm happy to talk about that. The psychology of influence has morphed in the decades, and I'm here to share with you. It was 1974, February. My girlfriend dumped me. I was an upper junior at Queens College, the youngest of 3 kids, of Milton and Estelle Hassan of Flushing, Queens, New York. Yes, I grew up 1.3 miles from Cult 45, DT. These women approached me in the student union and deceptively recruited me into a front group of this turned out to be a cult. And within 2 weeks, I was believing that World War III was about to happen, that Armageddon was coming, that Moon was the greatest man in human history. He was sinless. And for those of you who are too young to know about the Moonies, he's best known for the mass wedding ceremonies. He did 30,000 couples at one time of total strangers, but who believed in him as the Messiah. And within 2 weeks, I left my Judaism and I'm bowing to an altar with Moon's picture on it, reciting a pledge to fight with my life or kill for Korea. I'm not joking. And I was elevated to leadership very quickly. I guess they saw me as a nice American, tall, whatever. And so I was privy to these secret leadership meetings with Moon about how he talked about democracy was satanic. He talked about taking over America and amending the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who don't do what he says regarding the marriages. And I was a fanatic. My family freaked. My friends freaked. Steve, it's a cult. You're being brainwashed. I knew I wasn't brainwashed because I'm smart. I'm educated. I'm from a good family. I didn't feel brainwashed. I was having a religious experience. And guess what? When Moon said, we're all going to the Capitol steps to fast for 3 days for Nixon because God wants him to be president despite Watergate. And I called my father, who had voted for Nixon. I voted for McGovern. I said, hey, Dad, I'm fasting for Richard Nixon to be president, thinking he would love it. He said, Steve, you are right. He's a crook. I said, Dad, you don't understand. God is working. He said, Steve, now I know you're brainwashed. And my father got his chance. Within 2 years, I fell asleep at the wheel of a van due to sleep exhaustion. I should say I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night, 7 days a week, for no pay, working for father. And I fell asleep at the wheel of a van, drove into the back of a tractor trailer truck at 80 miles an hour, and nearly died, and was trapped for 30 minutes while the rescue workers saved my life. And there I was in a hospital for 2 weeks away from the cult. And by the way, this was 1976, so there were no cell phones, right? So I was away from the constant indoctrination. And I called my sister. I actually broke a rule. I called my sister Thea, and she said, you have a nephew. I want him to know his Uncle Stevie. You got to visit. I'm like, don't tell the parents. I think I can arrange it because I'm a leader. And she did tell my parents, and they arranged a deprogramming. And it's a long story, but my father cried, and he said, how would you feel if it was your son who met a controversial group, dropped out of college, quit his job, donated his bank account, and disappeared from your life? How would you feel? And he cried. And it got me right here. And I said, I'd probably do what you're doing now. But I thought he was brainwashed by the communist media. That's how I was indoctrinated. So I said, I'd probably be doing what do you want me to do? He said, just listen to these ex-members, learn about brainwashing and mind control, and if you want to go back at the end of 5 days, I'll drive you there myself. I said, done, because I was so fanatical. I was so confident that I had the truth. And little did I know, on day 4, when I learned about Chinese communist brainwashing from former military intelligence people who had studied it in the 50s, it ticked off every box. But wait a minute, we were God and communism was Satan, but it was the same brainwashing techniques. But that still wasn't enough to get me out. The following day, the deprogrammers asked me to read one of Moon's speeches and said, "What do you think, Steve?" And I read it, and for the first time in 2.5 years, I had a negative thought. I thought, what a liar. Moon was talking to congressmen and senators saying how much he loved America and respected Americans, and he was surprised that he was being accused of brainwashing Americans. And I had heard him speak in person at least 100 times, how stupid Americans were, right? But once I had that thought, he's a liar. That means he's not trustworthy. That means he can't be of God. And it was like a house of cards going plop, 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 plop in my mind. And I cried for 3 hours. And here I am, 45 years later, trying to share my experience with the planet because everyone needs to understand this is not a mystical thing. You've heard of MK Ultra, the CIA research into mind control. The Russians were doing it. There was a Cold War run-up. I was MK Ultra 3.0. I would have died on command, killed on command. And thank God my family rescued me. So I'm here to tell you there's a dual identity that happens. There was Steve Hassan of Flushing, Queens, and then Steve Hassan, the son of Moon and his wife, the true parents of the universe. The real Steve reacted to my father's tears. And now I want to tell a fast story. I know I'm running out of time. Fast story. My father called me up when I was in the cult, thinking that he could get me out by just giving me facts. Sounds familiar? He said, "Steve, what kind of messiah has an M16 gun factory?" Little did he know I was trained to do thought stopping, which is a cognitive behavioral technique. I was crush Satan, glory to heaven, peace on earth, glory to heaven, peace on earth, crush Satan, crush Satan. So my father's intention was to get me to think, but he drove me deeper in. And I have a little party prop that I want to share. It's actually called Chinese handcuffs. Have you ever seen this? The harder you pull, the tighter it gets. But if you explain to the person, you can get out of it by just putting your fingers together, using your thumbs to push. And voila. So what I'm here to share in my remaining time is a reality testing strategy. It's remarkably simple, and it's based on my doctoral dissertation on the BITE model of authoritarian control and my influence continuum. Step 1, disconnect. We are addicted to our cell phones, and people who are in mind control cults are constantly being reinforced. So we need to take, I'm challenging anyone who's listening to this. If you're sure you weren't brainwashed like I was, take a time out. Turn off your phone, turn off your screens for a week. Okay? Step 1, learn about Chinese communist brainwashing and the major models. And I'm here to tell you that I did for my doctoral program the first quantitative study on the BITE model of authoritarian control. And the B is behavior control, the I is information control, the T is thought control, and the E is emotional control. And the model basically says you have to think about an ethical influence side of informed consent, for example, where you know up front who the people are, what they believe, and what is expected, versus deception, outright lying, withholding vital information, or distorting it. And I have a much more robust influence continuum, but for simplicity's sake, I want to tell you that cognitive dissonance theory, which is from Leon Festinger, formed the basis of this. I added information control. But I have detailed behaviors that can show authoritarian control in a relationship, in a multi-level marketing group, a political situation, a religious group of any type. And the next step is seek out deliberately the best critics and most high-level former members you can find. Why? Because if you're in a mind control cult, you're programmed. Don't listen to the media. The media is the enemy of the people. Don't talk to apostates. They don't know anything. Take the position, hey, I'm an adult. It's my mind, and I get to decide. I can look at the evidence and think for myself. And it's the version of this, encouraging people to think for themselves as opposed to yelling at them, calling names. And listen for the facts. Next is honest self-reflection. Think back to your first exposure to the group. And for those of you born into authoritarian families or religious groups, there's a special variation of this for you. Or if you were born in North Korea or China, it's a little bit different. But honest self-reflection, for me, I had to think back. I was writing poetry. I wanted to teach English, right? And I wasn't interested in money. I wasn't interested in power. And Moon was, the higher I got up in the cult, I was like being told things like, hey, Steve, you should think what country you want to run when we take over the world. I was 21 years old. But that was my Moony self, not the real Steve. Honestly self-reflect, using the BITE model, thinking over key experiences, and then ask yourself, if I knew then what I know now, would I have ever gotten involved? The women lied to me. They said they were students. If I knew they were Moonies, I would have told them to get lost. I would have called security. Wake up, honest self-reflection. Look at yourself in the mirror. It's your life. It's your mind. You should control it, right? I'm part of a group of colleagues and friends. We're trying to do a Me Too moment. This is the call to action. If you are ever in an abusive relationship, a cult of any type, a company that was abusing you, and I haven't mentioned trafficking. Trafficking is illegal worldwide. Fraud, force, or coercion. And fraud and coercion forms my whole model. So I did my dissertation connecting the dots with all of these theories. And I say there are millions of us, but we need to get educated, help yourself first, really learn about cults and mind control, and then tell your story. Reach out to your family and friends. If you've cut off people that you care about in your family or friends, there are methods, and it's basically respectful curiosity and asking a good question and being quiet while you wait for the person to think.
Now that you've heard all of this, I highly encourage you, please go back, watch this again. Because sometimes when we watch things or we read something for the first time, it doesn't sink in. But then when we go back and review it again, and then we comprehend something or grasp something that we missed the first time. Because when you have months and years of repeated information continually being placed in your psyche, unconsciously, and you don't even know that you're brainwashed. We jump on the bandwagons and we agree with people who don't even have our best interests at heart. I may be poor, I may be broke, I may be barely scraping by, but hey, I'm gonna cling to what this guy who's got all the money in the world and believe and trust him, he's gonna help me. When in truth, reality, you're helping them. So watch this again, please, and share this, and listen to Steve Hassan, and just maybe we can help save somebody. Not just this, help save this country. And if we save this country, guess what? We will save the world. Because where we go, so does the world. Give me a thumbs up, baby. If you like the information I just presented to you, help me to be able to share this with others by giving me a like, share, comment, because these are the things that the bots target. And the thing about it is, we're in a computerized, a digital world. And it's no longer controlled by humans, but by technology. So if you comment, like, subscribe, these are the things that help your information get shared with others. Robert Wilkins, aka Basketball Tall, your BT dispatcher, bringing you news and commentary with a different flavor. And today's flavor has been about brainwashing. See you next time.